Welcome back. If you watched last week's video, you will have seen me build the walls for a batch of structures for Brian's layout. During this installment, I'm going to work on the roofs and foundations. So let's turn the camera around and get to work. Well, I've let the 4 houses set up overnight. I've taken them out of the jig. I've got all the walls for the bunkhouse clamped up and gluing. Let's put that aside. What I'm going to do next on these, before I attach the roof panels, is to build the foundations. That will hold the walls absolutely square, so I don't have any squareness problems later on. So it's time to put the wood away and get the styrene out. Well, I've completed step 1 of the foundations. What I've got is a styrene box. I used 80 thou. I make the template, put a hole in it with a hole saw so that there's plenty of room for the wiring plugs and everything. Now these I'm doing quite deep because they're going to be on a sloping lot, so I want the basement to be deep enough to hide the slope, and then this will be mounted in the layout so I can carve the scenery around it and then put the house on later after the scenery is done. I've taken a regular mill file and filed a slight chamfer along the top edge. It needs to be tight enough to hold the building in place without spreading the corners. Still need a little bit of adjustment. And then the next step will be to build up the outside. I've got this random stone sheet from the N-Scale Architect, and I found that this sheet and a sheet of 40 thou plain styrene laminated onto the edge is just about the right thickness with the 1/16 of an inch basswood that I'm using. That will be a later step because right now I want to get the roofs on. Now I started the foundations when I did because that will hold the bottom of the building absolutely square. Then once it's flat on the base with all 4 corners firmly against my workbench, then I know the top is also square, so I can put the roof on and know that I don't have a warped building. For the roof panels, I bought 1/16 inch basswood. I couldn't find 3/32, they were out of stock locally. 1/16 inch for HO is a little bit thin to represent a 2x6 fascia and fly rafter. But if I add a strip of 32nd inch, which I already have, that will be about right for 2x8 fascia and fly rafters. I'll have to notch it around the corners, so that'll be a little bit awkward. But on the plus side, having the extra strip underneath it will hide any imperfections in the top edges of the walls. I've already started cutting roof panels. A fairly common eaves overhang is around 16 inches. What I've done is I've cut these 5mm extra all the way around, which is a little bit oversized. That will allow for minor discrepancies, and then what I will do is sand it off to size on a block when it's all set up. But what I have to do before I can attach the roof panel is to cut a chamfer along the top edge, along the ridge. You can either do that with sandpaper or a knife. I'm just going to trim the edge off at an angle like this. One. Sorry about that, my battery cut out. But as I was saying, I've chamfered the top edges. The bottom edge I will do in situ once the glue has set up. Those go on like that, glued to the tops of the walls. And if you recall, the tops of the gables are only taped in place at the moment, but once the roof is on, they will be firmly glued. So no further attachment is necessary. There's no need even for a splice plate at the back. But since this is only a sub roof and it will be covered in tar paper, the fit at the top isn't critical as long as it's somewhere close. I'm not going to do the whole roof installation on camera because I want to be able to concentrate on what I'm doing instead of what I'm saying. But one trick I will show you to get the roof panels to fit properly, lay them on the bench side by side and attach them together with masking tape. That now forms a hinge. That was a little bit tight. You've got to leave yourself a little bit of space. Then that can be glued down using the walls as a guide, and you know that the ridge is correct. It's one less thing to have to worry about. And then what I will do, once I've got them in the right place and glued, I will just either weight the edges or tape them down to the foundation and then let the glue set up. Let me go away and do that, and I'll be right back. Well, I found I had to do one extra thing before I could put the roof panels on. These gable ends are wide enough that there's some flexibility in the end walls. So I put a ridge pole in out of 1/8 inch square strip wood, just to hold them the right distance apart. That way they stay a lot straighter as I'm positioning the roof. 3 of the buildings were fairly square. This one I had to put a brace in diagonally to square it up, and that will fit beautifully now. I got the roof panels hinged. They're still slightly oversized, but this one is ready to glue on now. Well, all the roofs have been glued on. While the glue's been drying, I've been working on the walls for the workshop and storage building. This has a slightly different structure. Instead of having a basement or crawl space under it, it's sitting on a slab foundation. So the siding does not go below the bottom of the doors. Here it's just the opposite. There's going to be a foot-high base of stones all the way around the outside. So you can see the doors actually go below the bottom of the siding in this case, which is why the man door looks really short, but it is the right height. Because I'm not able to get the bracing underneath the door, I've done it differently. If you see, I put spacers in and then put another piece along the back of it, so the door castings will just sit in those alcoves, like that. The rest of the construction is identical. I'm just going to put this aside and I'm going to go back to work on the other buildings. So stay tuned, I'll be right back. I may not have shown much footage of the bunkhouse being assembled, but what I've been doing is working on this while the glue on the 4 regular houses is setting up. Here's the foundation parts for the main area of the bunkhouse. It's a lot easier to treat the annex as a separate building and join the 2 foundations together afterwards, rather than to try to get it accurate the first time round. And something I didn't do on the other foundations, which is a lot easier, is to cut all the side pieces to go inside at one end and outside at the other. That way you have adjustment. So let's get this glued together. I've drawn a line. It doesn't have to be in the middle, it's somewhere near the middle, as long as it's the same distance from the top edge of all of them. And here's a good example of where I like to cut my pieces to go in at one end and out at the other, instead of having sides inside ends or vice versa. See that this one here is cut way long, and that really doesn't matter. Once the solvent is set, I will just file it off. And while that is setting, I'm going to build the foundation for the annex. Well, I could start shaving the roofs off to the right size, but I want to leave the glue to set up somewhat longer so it's nice and hard and I don't pull the joints apart while I'm doing it. So while that's continuing to set, I'm going to go back to work on the foundation. I cut the original pieces 25mm wide. These are going to need to be about 22 to 23. I'm going to start by cutting a whole load of strips from the 30 thou, and then I'll come back and add the stone sheeting. So let me get busy, I'll be right back. Well, I've cut a whole load of strips, 22.5mm deep, and basically I'm just going to go around all the foundations in turn, gluing them on. I need a bigger brush to get more solvent in, since I'm laminating almost inch wide pieces. Well, I've got that next step done on all the basements for all the buildings. I've also been working on putting the strips under the roof, so that will be cleaned up later on. I've filed the corners off nice and smooth. Now then, the final step with the basement is to add the stonework. I've cut these strips the same width as all the others, 22.5mm, and I'm just going to go around one more time . Well, it's a new day. I'm getting on quite well with the 6 structures. The storage and shop building is still a little bit behind the others, but since there's a lot less work to do on that, it'll probably be the first one finished. All the others require porches, and I've still got to, of course, finish these foundations. I've got to cut them off, file the corners, and then get the stonework to look good around the corner. I've got to sand the excess off the roof overhang, and then I can start working on details. Getting the roof overhang nice and even all the way around is really simple. I just put a plank of wood across the top of a sheet of sandpaper, and then just gently run it backwards and forward until it sits nice and flush on the wood. And at that point I know it's even all the way, and then I just finish it off using a flat file. Make sure you find one with a safe edge so that you don't carve great holes in the corner posts, and just take that burr off, and that roof is now ready to finish. So that's 1 down, 4 more to go. Well, I've done all the roof overhangs. On this building it was a little more complex because of the annex. I couldn't use the same procedure for this end, so what I did is I got all the easy walls done first, and then I just did this. I just eyeballed this one with a sanding block, keep checking it and just looking on the bottom until I think it's about the same all the way around, and I figure that's good enough. The same with the side walls of the annex. So all those roofs are now trimmed nicely. I've been working on the foundations, so I've cleaned up all the corners. This one I had to shave down the inside flange just a little bit because some of the bracing was a little bit too close, but it now fits reasonably well. Also, on some walls I found that there's a minor discrepancy in the height of the stonework, so I just get my flat file and just clean that up just a little bit until it fits perfectly. And bearing in mind, of course, that with a basic rectangular building there's 2 ways it can go on, and it might fit better one way than it does the other. So I just keep playing with them until I'm happy with the fit. I think that goes better that way. Well, once again, this video is already getting long enough, so I'll cut it off here and continue next time. For the next installment, I plan on working on the porches, showing you how I did those. So goodbye for now, and I hope to see you again next week. Thanks for watching.